Welcome everyone. I hope you're all doing great and doing well. Without further ado, let's dive into our story. The Mute Witness and the Mirror of Death. One of the Morocco's darkest alleyway crime. Some crimes leave a body. This one left a silence. A silence so heavy, it took the shape of a woman who could not speak, and yet, she was the only one who saw the truth. This is the story of a mute witness, a hidden alleyway, and a death that would haunt a Moroccan police unit for years to come. Stay with us. Morocco, 1984. The height of summer. The kind of heat that presses down on a city and refuses to let go. In those days, the judicial police worked with little more than instinct, grit, and whatever resources the state could spare. Two men, Inspector Zaki and Detective Ahmed, served under a commander whose name still echoes through the corridors of Moroccan law enforcement to this day. Inspector El. It was an ordinary afternoon, suffocating, still, and then the radio crackled. An urgent dispatch. All units, immediate response. Destination, the old Mela Quarter. For those unfamiliar, the Mela is the historic Jewish quarter found in nearly every major Moroccan city. Rabat, Kenitra, Casablanca, El Jadida. Narrow, maze-like alleyways, towering stone doorways, archways carved with dates stretching back to 1876. Most of the original families had long since left. For Casablanca, for Fez, for lives overseas. But the buildings remained. Massive, ancient homes, carved up over the decades into small, dark rented rooms. Home now to the poor, the isolated, the forgotten. It was into this maze that Zaki and his team were sent. When the squad car pulled up to the edge of the Mela, they didn't find a crime scene. They found a wall of people. A crowd from a nearby souk had spilled into the alley. Dozens of onlookers, drawn by rumor, by fear, by the oldest human instinct there is, to look at what we're told not to look at. Local officers were already there, straining to hold the line, to keep the crowd back from a narrow, dead-end passage swallowed in shadow. Somewhere down that passage, something terrible was waiting. Zaki pushed through the crowd. The local officers gave him the little they knew. A woman, murdered, inside one of the hidden courtyard rooms at the alley's end. Who raised the alarm? He asked. They pointed to an old police car parked at the edge of the chaos. Inside sat a local woman, shaking, distraught. Her name, or rather, the name the neighborhood knew her by, was Zeynep. They called her, with affection, Zazuna. Zeynep could not speak. Not one word. Not that day. Not ever. When Zaki approached her, she didn't answer with her voice. She answered with her whole body, frantic hands, wide eyes, arms flailing toward the black mouth of the alley behind her. She was trying to tell him something no words could hold. A second woman, a neighbor, stepped forward to fill the silence Zeynep couldn't. She explained, earlier that morning, Zeynep had come running to her door, terrified beyond words, which, for Zeynep, was the only kind of terror she had. Zeynep had gone to check on her friend, a woman named Layla. She'd found Layla's door unlocked, slightly open. Wrong. She stepped inside, and whatever she saw in that room stole the last thing she had left to lose. Not her voice, she never had one, but her sense of safety in the world. Too frightened to go near it again, Zeynep had run straight to the local headquarters. the Kiata, to raise the alarm the only way she could. With her hands, with her fear, with her whole shaking body. The neighbors stayed behind to wait for the police. The detectives followed the path Zainab had pointed to. At the very end of a long, windowless corridor, cut off almost entirely from daylight, lit only by a single skylight cut into the roof above, they found it. The room, and the victim, a woman, mid-30s. Her name was Layla, and Inspector Zaki knew her. Years earlier, during his time on night patrol near Bank El Maghrib on Mohammed V Avenue, one of the city's great central crossroads, he used to see her, Layla and Zainab, standing together near the bus stop across from the bank, waiting through the late hours for whoever might come. Life had not been gentle with Layla, a divorced mother, raising a young son alone, born into a world that gave neither of them much grace. The years on the street had worn at her. But even then, people said she carried a beauty that hardship never fully erased. She and Zainab had survived together, watched each other's backs in the dark, and the officers on that night beat had known them both, had, in their own quiet way, kept an eye out for two women the world had mostly turned its back on. Now Zaki stood at the threshold of Layla's room. The woman he remembered from those cold street corners had met her end here, alone, behind a door that should have kept her safe. The room had no electricity, no power at all. An officer was sent running for heavy lanterns just to see, and when the light finally came on, it told a story of its own. A low wooden table, empty wine bottles scattered across it, the remains of fried fish, half-eaten, ashtrays overflowing. Someone had been here with her, late into the night, sharing a meal, sharing a drink. Whoever it was hadn't left through the front door the way they came in. Somewhere in this hidden corner of the Mela, behind a door left carelessly open, a woman's last night alive had unfolded in front of a guest she trusted enough to let inside. The question Inspector Zaki now had to answer wasn't just who did this. It was, who was Layla really waiting for that night? And what happened in the hours between the last bottle of wine and the silence that Zainab walked into the next morning? At first, in the dim lantern light, it looked almost peaceful. Layla's body was slumped forward over a traditional floor cushion near the low table. From a distance, you might have thought she'd simply fallen asleep. But as the detectives moved closer, that illusion collapsed. She had been struck from behind while seated. One attack, fast, lethal, a sharp blade, and no warning at all. But it wasn't the wound that stopped every officer in that room cold. It was what came after. The killer had severed Layla's head, and then staged it, lifted, placed deliberately on top of her own wooden wardrobe, resting just above the mirror built into its center. Blood ran down in dark trails over the polished wood. Her long dark hair hung loose over the edge. This wasn't rage. Rage doesn't stop to arrange a scene. This was something else. Every true crime case has one moment that reminds you the people investigating it are just people. While the forensics team prepared to document the scene, a uniformed beat officer stepped inside. A big man, built like a wall, dressed in the classic khaki summer uniform of the Urban Corps. He'd spent the morning outside, holding back the crowd. He wasn't prepared for what was waiting for him inside. "Lord preserve us," he gasped. "Did they kill her?" Before Inspector Zaki could stop him, the officer stepped toward the wardrobe, and at that exact moment, towel wrapped carefully around his hands. Zaki reached up to lower Layla's head down beside her body for examination. The officer got a full, unobstructed look. His face went white. His knees buckled, and the big man collapsed, right there on the blood-stained floor, beside the victim herself. The detectives scrambled to lift him. Water on the face. A call for an ambulance. And as they carried him out on a stretcher, his uniform soaked red from the floor beneath him. The crowd outside saw the blood-soaked khaki and drew the only conclusion that made sense to them. A rumor tore through the Mela in seconds. A police officer had been murdered inside. Zaki rode with his unconscious colleague to the hospital while the rest of the team held the scene. In the ER, doctors moved fast. Oxygen, a saline for, working to stabilize a man in full traumatic shock. And then, in the hallway, Zaki's radio crackled to life. The chief prosecutor, directly. The rumor had already climbed all the way to the high court. An officer, butchered, inside the Mela. Zaki corrected it immediately. No officer harmed. Just a man who'd looked directly into something no one should have to see. Back in the ward, the big officer finally opened his eyes. He grabbed Zaki's arm, hands trembling. "Brother," he whispered, "I can't even stand the blood at Eid al-Adha, when they slaughter the sheep. I shave my own head with an electric razor, just so I never see a drop of blood from a nick. And then I saw that head. My heart just gave out." The doctors confirmed it. Severe traumatic shock. Psychiatric leave, effective immediately. Zaki arranged for him to be driven home to his family. The investigation had one fewer man, and it was time to get back to work. With Layla's body on its way to the morgue and the scene finally cleared, Zaki returned to the precinct. Waiting for him in the hallway, two witnesses, the neighbor, and Zainab, the only person who had actually seen what happened inside that room, and the one person who could not say a single word about it. The first attempts to question her were chaos. Zainab gestured wildly, miming, pointing, acting things out with her whole body. But the neighbor kept getting it wrong. Zainab would shake her head, again and again, desperate, watching her own testimony get lost before it even reached the page. Something had to change. Zaki went straight to the public prosecutor's office. An emergency order came back fast, bringing a specialist, a master instructor from a military-affiliated school for deaf and mute students. When he arrived and sat down across from Zainab, something in the room shifted. For the first time since that morning, someone could actually understand her. Watching the two of them communicate, fluent, fast, unmistakably clear, Zaki found himself thinking back to his own childhood. Growing up, disability was never treated as some kind of wall. He remembered playing football in the alleys with a deaf boy from the neighborhood, the two of them understanding each other perfectly without ever needing a single word. Human connection, he'd learned long before this case, never really depended on speech at all. And now that same silent language was about to crack a murder wide open. Before the specialist ever arrived, the detectives had tried to crack Zainab's gestures themselves. It went about as well as you'd expect. Zainab kept slapping her forehead, miming something held near her head, making a sound, Pam, Pam. Zaki, squinting, deadly serious, guessing, bread. Cubs. He thought she was miming a round loaf balanced on someone's head. He was wrong. She mimed marching. Mom raising something, firing, and suddenly it clicked. Not bread, a beret. She wasn't describing a meal. She was describing a man, a soldier, a military man, the kind who wears a beret, the kind who might have shared a bottle of wine and a plate of fried fish with Layla on the last night of her life, before leaving nothing behind but a locked door, an empty room, and a message only a mute woman could deliver. Inspector Zaki finally had his first real lead. But a description isn't a name, and a beret could belong to any one of thousands of men in this country. The question now was simple and impossible all at once. How do you find one soldier in a city full of them, when your only witness can't say his name out loud? With the specialist seated across from her, finally speaking her language, Zainab's story stopped being fragments. It became a narrative. Clear, complete, devastating. The man in the beret was no stranger. He was Layla's lover, a soldier stationed at the local military barracks, and a regular presence in her home. He brought food, meat, wine. He was, by every account, devoted to her. He'd even filed paperwork at his base, requesting official permission to marry her. But devotion, in this story, came laced with poison. Jealousy ran through their relationship like a fault line. Layla was fiercely independent. She wouldn't give up the nights, the freedom, the life she'd built to survive. And the soldier's modest pay could never keep pace with what she needed to live on. That night, he'd come to make peace after a bitter fight. And Zainab, ever the mediator, ever the quiet keeper of the peace between two volatile people she loved, had sat with them, drinking, watching, trying one more time to hold it all together. Watching Zainab's hands move, fast, precise, carrying emotion no spoken word could improve on. Something stirred in Inspector Zaki. Years before, back when he rode with the motorcycle unit, there had been a small barber shop in the Yusufia district of Rabat. The barber there was mute too, a gentle, quietly perceptive man who became, over time, something like a friend. He never spoke, not once. And yet Zaki remembered sitting in that chair for hours on long summer evenings, through the slow nights of Ramadan, and somehow, through a look, a gesture, the smallest shift of expression, that barber told him his whole life story. Struggles, triumphs, all of it. It was a lesson Zaki had learned early and never forgotten. Take away a person's voice, and something else sharpens to compensate. The eyes see more. The instincts run deeper. Zainab was proof of that truth all over again. She hadn't just witnessed what happened in that room. She'd understood it. The tension, the danger building under the surface, long before anyone else in that room even sensed it coming. The instructor kept translating, gesture by gesture, as Zainab walked them through the final hour. Despite her efforts to keep the peace over wine and fried fish, the soldier's jealousy kept climbing. Slowly, then all at once. Late into the night, drunk and restless, Layla announced she was going out. She pulled on a light bathrobe. She was headed down the dark corridor to see the local public scribe, a man who lived above his own shop, a man she'd apparently been seeing, quietly, on the side. The soldier exploded. He threw himself in front of the door, shouting that he knew exactly where she was going, exactly who she meant to see. "You're not leaving this room." But Layla wasn't afraid of him. She mocked him, his salary, his jealousy, his claim on her at all, and told him she'd go wherever she pleased. She slipped past him, out into the alley. He went after her, grabbed her by her long hair, dragged her back inside the room by force. And Zainab, watching a fight spiral somewhere she could no longer reach, no voice to shout, no way to intervene, did the only thing left to do. She threw up her hands, walked out, shut the door behind her, and went home, leaving the two of them alone with whatever came next. Now the detectives had a shape for their killer. A soldier, a beret, a jealous lover. What they didn't have was a name. Zainab knew roughly where the base was. She'd gone there herself, a few times, waiting outside the gates while Layla met him. But the soldier's full name, his rank, his regiment, that was beyond what her gestures could carry. The case sat there, one crucial detail short of an arrest. Then, 2 days later, the door to the precinct opened, and Layla's son walked in, 14 years old, a boy who, despite his age, already understood far more about his mother's complicated life than any child should have to. He knew the soldier, knew him well enough to hand Detective Zaki everything the case had been missing. Full name, rank, exact unit, stationed right there at the city barracks. Just like that, the investigation had its man. Zaki and Inspector Elani moved fast, drafting an urgent report to the public prosecutor. The response came just as quickly, an official requisition addressed directly to the commander of the barracks. But arresting a soldier isn't like arresting a civilian. Military ground answers to its own authority. So the judicial police didn't go alone. They moved in alongside the military gendarmerie, the only force with legal standing to make an arrest on that soil. Together, they approached the high, sprawling walls of the barracks, warrant in hand. And that's when the case took its next hard turn. The suspect was gone. For 48 hours, the soldier hadn't reported for duty. His commanding officers hadn't even noticed. Not until the judicial police showed up asking for him by name. He'd gone AWOL, absent without leave, on the exact night of the murder. The gendarmerie began retracing his movements inside the base, piecing together how a man could vanish from a guarded military compound without triggering a single alarm. They found his route, his routine, unauthorized way out, scaling the tall back wall of the barracks under cover of darkness, dropping down the other side into a stretch of dense, unlit forest that swallowed the base's edge hole. A wall he'd climbed quietly more times than anyone on that base had ever bothered to notice, until the one night it mattered most. Somewhere beyond that wall, in the dark of the trees, a man who once filed marriage papers for the woman he loved was now running from her murder. A man can run, but a man with no papers, no money, and no allies can't run far. The gendarmerie knew that better than anyone. They launched a coordinated sweep. Every transport hub, every nearby rural village, every known military checkpoint for miles around. 48 hours. That's all it took. The suspect was intercepted, taken into custody without a fight. No chase, no struggle. Just handcuffs, a heavy escort, and a long, silent ride back to the judicial police interrogation room. Under the harsh, bare bulb of that interrogation room, the soldier tried, at first to play the part of a man with nothing to hide. Cold, indifferent, untouchable. It didn't last. Inspector Zaki laid it all out in front of him. Zainab's testimony, translated in full and unshakable detail. The exact timeline of his own movements that night. Movements he thought no one had tracked. Piece by piece, his defense came apart. He covered his face with his cuffed, trembling hands. And he confessed to all of it. He admitted it plainly. That night, he'd gone over the back wall of the barracks the same way he always did. Quietly, practiced, invisible. Only this time, tucked inside his jacket, he carried something new. A heavy hunting knife. He said he only meant to reconcile with her, to fix what jealousy kept breaking. But the wine was already working against him, and so was everything he couldn't control about the way he loved her. After Zainab left, after the door shut and the two of them were finally, fatally, alone, Layla made clear she was still going to the scribe's shop, still going to walk out that door. And the fight that followed didn't stay a fight for long. Drunk, enraged, he drew the knife, stepped behind her as she sat on the cushion. The same cushion where, hours earlier, they'd all shared wine and fried fish together. And in seconds, it was over. What came next, he said, wasn't planned. It was panic. He couldn't stand her eyes. Lifeless, staring back at him in that dim, airless room. So he did the unthinkable. Severed her head completely. Lifted it. Set it above the mirror on her own wardrobe. As if some part of him needed her reflection to look away, too. Then he went back the way he came. Over the wall. Into the trees. Into hiding. Until 48 hours later, when the gendarmerie brought him back into the light. With his full confession on record and the murder weapon recovered, the charges were formalized. Premeditated murder. Decapitation. Desertion of military duty. Handed over to both military and civil courts. He received a sentence severe enough to guarantee one thing. He would live out the rest of his life behind cold, unmoving prison walls. Justice, in the strictest sense of the word, had been served. But not every wound closes in a courtroom. Layla's 14-year-old son, the boy who walked into that precinct and handed detectives the one piece of information that cracked the entire case, was left with nothing. No father, no family home, no one left to catch him. The city simply absorbed him, the way it does with children no one is watching anymore. Years later, Inspector Zaki would still catch glimpses of him sometimes, wandering the downtown boulevards, a quiet, almost ghost-like presence, carrying a night of wine, jealousy, and rage that was never his to carry in the first place. A reminder that crimes of passion don't end when the cell door closes. They just move on to someone else. A mute woman who saw everything and could tell no one. A soldier who loved fiercely enough to destroy what he loved. And a boy left to walk the same streets his mother once did, alone. That's the story of the mute witness and the mirror of death. If this case stayed with you the way it stayed with us, do us a favor. Hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. It's what keeps these real, forgotten cases alive. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next case.